Hey guys, Eric here. Before we get started on the episode, I wanted to tell you about the exciting new partnership that we've started. If you're anything like Joe and I, you absolutely love collected editions of comics. Whether they be trade paperbacks, hardcovers, or my personal favorites, omnibus and absolute editions. With this in mind, we now have the opportunity to save you a little moolah on the books that you're hunting for. We are now partnered with organic priced books to bring you promo codes to save you a little money on each purchase that you make. So now you can save the trouble of going out to the Barnes & Noble and overpaying for the books that you love. Organic Priced Books is a wonderful small business that already has collected editions at vastly discounted prices, and they ship directly to you. And hey, you get to support this show as you do so. So go to the link in the description of this episode and use our promo codes on your purchases. Those codes include tfrbatpod, which saves you $2 on any order, or tfrbatpod Ship It Together, which will save you 5% off the total of any order of 3 books or more. A huge thank you to Organic Price Books for presenting TFR listeners with the chance to save on books that we all love. And a huge thank you as well goes to all of you guys who support Organic Priced Books and The Fire Rises. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome, citizens of Gotham, to The Fire Rises, a Batman podcast focusing on all things The Dark Knight and his world. If you'd like to connect with the show, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at tfrbatpod. And I guess Twitter is now X, so keep that in mind. But if you'd like to send us an email, if you have thoughts, questions, comments, or even suggestions for future episodes of the show, you can send those emails to tfrbatpod@gmail.com. My name is Eric Carter, and I am the host of the show, and I am joined once again by my co-host, Mr. Joseph Fornerato. Joe, this is your episode, buddy. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm a little nervous because we have not discussed this at all prior to recording. So you guys can all blame me. Whoever actually listens, this will probably be our least listened to episode that we've done.
Lee Ankrit definitely blames you.
Yes, he was not happy.
But hey, it's not something we're doing ongoing. It's just a one-time thing, and we did get some interest from it. Without further ado, today we are celebrating a little bit of an anniversary. This is 10 years, Joe?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 2013.
2013.
So this is the 10-year anniversary of the release of the animated Batman series, Beware the Batman. All right, Joe, and may I just say, just to begin with, on a really positive note, I do really like the title, Beware the Batman. That's a really fun title for a TV show. That would be a good comic title. So yeah, just Beware the Batman. Great title. But the series was released on Cartoon Network originally in 2013, and it came right off of the heels of Batman the Brave and the Bold. So this is something I wanted to get your thoughts on, Joe, because I didn't realize this. This show went into production immediately after The Brave and the Bold ended. And apparently it wasn't because of, any disregard to The Brave and the Bold, but they had done that show for so long that they kind of wanted to go to a little bit of a darker tone for Batman. But I thought it was curious that immediately they went into production on another Batman show. And that has not happened since. We're still waiting on Caped Crusader. But yet, right off the heels of Brave and the Bold, what do you think of that decision to switch it up so much?
Well, it kind of, shows what a different time we're in now, where back then, prior to the whole streaming craze, it was, hey, let's get a Batman show out again right away. We want a Batman show on our networks. And I think it was more, like you said, they went different, but I think it was more just about, hey, let's keep having a Batman show on our network. Why not? And I didn't realize it was that close to Brave and the Bold, because for some reason I didn't follow Brave and the Bold when it was first airing.
Mhm.
I know about it now, and I've watched, I think, every episode since. But I did follow this when it was announced, and I was, even as bizarre as this looked, and the tone and the animation, everything that was kind of off-putting to most people with this show, I tend to understand, but for some reason I was still following it. I remember the first teaser that came out. I remember, everything going on around it, and I remember being there for the first episode, excited about it, or at least um I guess anxious for it. Like I wanted to know how it was going to be. So I don't know how that happened where I missed Brave and the Bold, and because it feels like Brave and the Bold was much earlier than this in my mind. So that's very interesting to me.
Hmm. Yeah. And, just for full transparency, the first time that I did watch this show was in preparation for this episode. I had never seen this show. I knew that it existed. I knew when it was coming out. But I wasn't the animation style when I saw like the production stills and the artwork they did for this show. I was off put by it, and I think I just never got into it. I never caught the interest to watch it, which I think happened a lot, which goes into why this, unfortunately this show only got one season. And I believe I can't remember how many episodes because I did a little research on it. But they only did like half the episodes on Cartoon Network, and then the rest of the show aired on Toonami for Adult Swim. So interestingly, I think unfortunately, when you see these shows go to Adult Swim, if they're on late at night, it's probably a sign of impending doom. Wouldn't you agree?
This show was doomed almost
Mm.
instantly. I don't know the logistics of why, but this show, I mean, this was back in the days where you had to set your DVR, and luckily, I mean, if you were lucky, your DVR found the show for you.
Mm.
This show aired at 3 in the morning at sometimes, like at some point. Like it was so random. It wasn't like every episode was midnight in the last season. I mean, in the last part when it was released. It was like completely random sometimes. So it was really, even for someone that was DVRing it and uh waiting for it, it would still be confusing and a little off-putting that I don't remember if I even finished it while it was airing. I finished it on the Blu-ray releases because I think I had remembered people saying the second part of the series was really good. And, we're only going to discuss the first 3 episodes here, but sadly, I mean, I hope you enjoyed it enough that you might want to continue, because I think the back half of this series is the show's strongest section. I mean, not to, just to give you a broad example, the second part, if I remember correctly, deals more with like Harvey Dent and uh I'm trying to remember, like Lady Shiva plays a part there, Ra's al Ghul. There's a lot of really cool stuff in part two,
Mhm.
which again, we're not going to really discuss it too much. I just wanted to give you an example of like where the show went, because I think one of the big gripes of the show is that in the early episodes, when it got destroyed with ratings or whatever killed it, was it was trying really hard to do something different. And I think that's something that um hurt it, was because, it uses Katana instead of Robin or Batgirl.
Mhm.
Um it used villains that weren't really popular.
Well,
So
yeah, and I think that
then
was one of the things that threw me off because the the underworld of Gotham in this show is kind of it's a not really a who's who of Gotham's villains. You've got Anarchy, Magpie, Tobias Well, Phosphorus Rex, Professor Pig, Mr. Toad, who I didn't even know who that was honestly before the show. Um, Lady
Mr. Toad and Professor Pig are big Grant Morrison
Yeah, yeah,
creations.
and I actually do like
Yeah.
Professor Pig, so I was kind of interested in that. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's not a run of the mill approach. I'd say that, and I will give them one thing. I think one thing I appreciate is the ambition of this show, but I think the
Hmm.
ambition was also part of the downfall. Because from what I can tell, this was not a very financially conservative show to produce. It seems like it was very expensive. And I don't know if you knew this part, but in looking it up, according to what I'm reading here, the animation, the 3D style animation, necessitated that they use hand built items like inanimate objects like ships and stuff that were in the city streets. They actually built this stuff. So it was sets that they shot on and then they animated over it.
I did not know that. That's pretty crazy though. Like, and say what you want about like the character
Mhm.
designs, because I think they're a little off-putting. I love the like the cityscape and like Wayne Manor. I think looks really cool.
Mhm.
Um, and it's funny that you say all that about the animation because maybe this was in production prior to Green Lantern failing, but the Green Lantern animated series uses the same
Mhm.
style, and that failed after one season also. Now, granted, it's Green Lantern, it's not Batman. Um, but that show, I don't know. Did you ever watch that show?
Green Lantern?
Or is that another casualty of the
I
style?
didn't watch it when it came out, but I own it now on iTunes, and I've watched
Okay.
it since, and I really like that show.
It's yeah, it's
It's a
great.
really good show.
And that one doesn't play it at I mean, that one goes it's Green Lantern, so they can go more traditional because there haven't been, 8 different Green Lantern iterations over the years. Where Batman, they went, different. And they they went different in every way. There was nothing um recognizable or nothing what's the word I'm looking for?
It wasn't
Um
traditional at all.
yeah, there was just nothing comforting or there was nothing familiar. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm sorry.
I got a very, and you can tell me whether I'm way off base here. I got a very Earth One vibe from this show.
Oh, without a doubt, this was right around the time that Earth One came out, if I remember right. The first volume.
Yeah, which is one thing I will say. Like, there's portrayals in this show. Um, like Alfred, I'm not really crazy about this version of Alfred, if I'm honest. And I've only seen 3 episodes, so take that with a grain of salt. But it
Mhm.
just the bald Alfred that leaned very much more into the Earth One style badass Alfred that almost has no resemblance to the Alfred that we know and love. It really threw me
Mhm.
off.
Yeah, I mean, DC went pretty hard with the Batman Earth One influence on a lot of their stuff. I mean, even if you remember when Jeremy Irons was cast for BVS, a lot of people assumed he was going to be much more of the Earth One interpretation, which I think he's a good combination of um the traditional Alfred and maybe a little bit more of a new age Alfred. But beside the point, it's yeah, this again, it just went very different. And I mean, I don't know where you want to go, but I am curious. Like, did you at least get some enjoyment out of it other than, yes, obviously the animation is strange. So what do you think about the animation as far as like the landscape, the designs, other than like I would assume you don't like the character designs. Like Batman looks odd.
I like a lot of the character designs. I like the way that Professor Pig looks. Um,
Mhm.
I think Anarchy looks really good. Some of the characters look great, and I do love the cityscapes. I don't like the way Batman looks at all. Um,
Mhm.
it just the cowl is kind of squished to me, and then
Yeah.
you've got the really angular long ears. I,
He almost looks like, now that I'm thinking about it, like Super Pets
he
version.
does, yeah. That's the first thing I thought of. This is like a less warped version
Yeah.
of the Super Pets Batman. Um, I like the portrayal of Batman. I like
Mhm.
how he's presented in the show. But the look, I don't know like how often I'll go back to it just because the look just really throws me off. And that's unfortunate, but it is, you know, what's weird is there's a shot in the first episode. It kind of reminds me of the BVS shot where Bruce is looking at the bat suit. Because
Mhm.
the bat suit kind of opens out of a compartment. I like the
Yeah.
bat suit when it's freestanding and not on Batman. It looked better there than
Yeah.
it does on him. So just overall though, to answer your question, um, this show is not for me. It
Mhm.
just there was not enough, I guess, that was familiar and comforting for me to really get into it as a Batman show. That's not to say I won't finish it, because if I've gotten, you know, if there's nothing else to do and I'm looking for something Batman to watch, I may very well finish this show. Um, but we'll get into it with the first episode. But even like, I was really excited for Professor Pig. This doesn't really resemble the Professor Pig I know, if that makes sense.
No, and Professor Pig is not an easy character to use for a kid show.
No, he's not. Um,
Um, and yeah, like I will say the first 3 episodes do a lot of seed planting
mhm.
for the rest of the show, but I don't think it gives you enough goodwill to make people want to continue the show. And I think that was its greatest downfall, was it took some big swings of setting up some stuff, but if you don't know where it's going, there's not enough here to make you interested in where it's going. If that makes sense. Like, I know where it's going, so I remember, oh, that's setting up this and that's setting up this, but if you don't know, I don't think it grabs you enough.
Yeah, that's where I was at with the first three. There's some.
Like, they feel like 3 one-offs, don't they? Like, they feel like completely different stories that have nothing to do with each other, and you think, okay, this show is just going to be villain of the week,
Mhm.
and they're going to be villains that I don't care about. But that's not what the show ends up. Or it's not what the show ends up doing. So I'm really curious as we go along, as because I am going to probably rewatch the show and see where it goes and try to jog my memory, because I don't remember when it started becoming serialized. Like, they ended up introducing Metamorpho, um, a lot more happens as the show goes on. And I know we're only going to discuss the first 3 episodes, but I did want to just give my little thoughts on the show as a whole, because I think the best parts of the show, unfortunately, are the parts that nobody watched, because the second half of this show was barely on TV. I mean, like I said, I didn't even watch it on TV. I watched it on the Blu-ray, and the Blu-ray was released in 2 parts, and the second part, I want to say, even got delayed for release, where it took almost a year to get the second part. Like, I remember watching this like way after I watched the first part. Um, so, but yeah, I mean, you can take over and try to steer the ship here back
Yeah,
to
no,
what we're supposed to be covering, but
no. I think that the big point is the beginning of the show doesn't give you the hook that I think maybe the show may have deserved in the later half, and I may be curious to see that. But it's clear by what happened, because 3 months after the premiere, uh, it was pulled from Cartoon Network and it was put on
mhm,
hiatus. And then when it did come back, I don't think anybody knew it was coming back. So the people who were the small amount of people who were watching it didn't even know that it was coming back or where to find it. So that's the
yeah.
unfortunate part there. Um,
So this is pretty crazy. So the second part, I didn't know this. The second part all aired in September of 2014. Oh, sorry. So a couple episodes in August, but they just dumped this It went from October of 2013
Mm-hmm.
to then the following July,
Yep.
a few episodes, and then almost the final. I'm going to say, let me count real quick. The final 8 episodes were aired. No, 9 episodes were aired in September and just dumped in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and the saddest part about that is the first episode where it came back. I was reading this earlier today. The first episode when it came back was written by Lynn Wein.
I just saw that. I know.
And you can look at because I'm looking at the ratings here. So the last episode of the original run, episode 11, had a 1.25 rating. It dropped by well over half when it came back.
Yeah.
Because that episode 12, when it was dropped on Toonami, had a 0.51. So from a 1.25 to a 0.51 is a pretty big drop for ratings. But nobody knew where to find it. But that's neither here than there. We can keep going over that, but it is what it is. But let's get into these episodes that we watched, Joe. So we did watch the first 3 episodes, and we're going to do this kind of like we did with the animated series. I'm going to give a little synopsis, and then we'll get into our thoughts on the episode. So the pilot, the very first episode, is called Hunted, and in it, eco-terrorists Professor Pig and Mr. Toad are hunting Gotham City's resident billionaires Simon Stagg, Michael Holt, and Bruce Wayne to make them pay for their crimes against nature. Now, with the stakes being the billionaires' lives, Batman has to solve this case fast, but when Wayne's butler, Alfred, is kidnapped in Bruce's place, Batman must save the day. Later, Alfred hires a new bodyguard for Bruce, Tatsu Yamashiro, otherwise known as Katana. So Katana basically becomes the Robin of this show, as Joe had said earlier. So Joe, with the premiere episode here, I mean, everything that I kind of didn't like about the show was out front and on display in in the very first episode. I will say, just to go back a little bit, the theme song, I love the theme song for this show.
It's catchy. It's definitely catchy.
I really like it. And I do like the red and black. Red and black looks great together, and I think it really works well for Batman. Hence the Batman movie we just got recently.
Yeah, I think the title card is cool looking.
It is really cool. But we really get started here with this Alfred. That's, because kind of the opening here, we get after the original intro, we get Batman or Bruce waking up in bed, and he's attacked by this masked stranger, and they have this little battle back and forth, and it turns out that it's this badass bald Alfred. So I guess just first thought, what did you think of Alfred's introduction? And I didn't get to ask you this earlier. What do you think of Alfred overall in this show?
Well, this is going to be the last time I say anything about the release. I just looked it up real quick because I was curious, and then I'll answer your question. But just to give you an example, like just to add more to this, the show was released on Blu-ray on September 30th of 2014. The final episodes aired on September 30th, 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So you could watch this on Blu-ray the day that all these episodes were released. So like they did literally dump this. Like this was not supposed to be aired when it was, but that's beside the point. And that is why I ended up just watching it on Blu-ray, I guess, the second part. But as far as Alfred goes, I think because it's hard, like at the time, yes, it was definitely jarring for me. Now I'm this is just this version of Alfred to me. I mean I've had 10 years to digest this show. So it doesn't even it doesn't have an effect on me anymore. It's just I've accepted it. I think if I remember right, he might get softer as the show goes on. But I still see those. He's not quite as bad as Earth 1 Alfred, if I remember correctly from Earth 1. He has the emotional side to Bruce here. It's not as, it's not Michael Caine or Michael Goff, but you could see signs of it. So I don't have a problem with the way they do it. Again, they're doing their thing. And I mean, we say it a lot on here. I have my Batman the Animated Series. I have the Brave and the Bold. Now I have all these other versions. I'm okay with them doing this take on Alfred. I think he's still true to the character. Yes, it's a different interpretation. But to me, he's still Alfred. He's not so far gone that I don't recognize him as Alfred. It's just, is it different? Absolutely. But I could just accept it as a different take. And I will say, he's the furthest from quote unquote comics accurate as far as these characters go. Do you agree with that? At least, like, Batman is still Batman, Gordon is still Gordon, Barbara's still Barbara, even Katana's different, obviously, but she's still,
I would
you
say it's
know.
between Alfred and Professor Pig on who's the farthest apart from the comic.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Professor Pig, they definitely, and like I said, that's more because of the liberties they have to take with that character. They make him like a goofball in this. Like, does he recite rhymes in the book? I don't remember in the comics. I don't remember any of that.
I don't think so. I really started liking Professor Pig, and this is way late, but I really started
In
liking
Gotham?
Professor Pig in Gotham. Not Gotham. You put that in my head. In
I liked him in Gotham.
I liked him there too, but I really started liking him in Arkham Knight, the video game, because
Oh, okay.
just the way he goes about, because he's a serial killer.
Is he the DLC in that? He's not part of the main
No, it's
story, is he?
no, it's through. He's a side story in the game.
Okay,
Because
yeah,
you
I
have
don't
to
even
find all
remember.
these bodies that are pinned up on different
Yeah.
buildings and stuff.
Yes. Yep.
But yeah, he's a fascinating character as a serial killer. So
Mhm.
I guess that's part of the problem here is my expectations, because going into this show, I knew that it had aired on Toonami. I completely forgot about the Cartoon Network aspect of it. So I knew we were getting a little bit of a darker Batman show. So when I first saw Professor Pig and Mr. Toad in this episode, and they're kind of like you described, they're kind of goofballs and they're eco
Yeah.
terrorists. So they're not really flat out killers. It was
Mhm.
like, okay, you just got to go with it at
Yeah.
that point. But it wasn't what I was expecting, and I think that's partly on me.
But I mean, it's not it's not your fault that you expected the characters to be more like they are in the comics. That's, I mean, that's just kind of, you're going out of your way to do these characters that aren't familiar to most people. They chose to use these characters and do their own thing with them, where they could have just done something a little bit more like the comics to bring more recognition to the characters from the comics, if that makes sense. I just, yeah,
Right.
I will
So
say, I mean, out of the 3 episodes we saw, I would say the first episode, and again, that's unfortunate because it's the pilot. I think the first episode is the weakest.
yeah, I would agree with that. And having said that, I do like the kind of the aspect they have where Professor Pig and Mr. Toad are going after Gotham's elite. I mean, they're going
Mhm.
after the people who they think have, the one percenters. They've quote unquote committed crimes against nature. So I do like that they're kidnapping these upper echelon people. But I think, and this is where I'll stop beating up Professor Pig. I think I was expecting, I wasn't expecting a all out mass murdering serial killer, because that would be a little too graphic, even for if the beginning of the show was on Adult Swim. But I think I was expecting sort of like the lens that Bruce Timm would take with the Batman the Animated Series characters. They could still be very dark, very menacing, but just kind of curtailed just a little bit to be acceptable for kids. And it was,
Yeah, you could have him.
yeah,
You could have him want to kill these people and hint at what he might do, but then not have him actually be able to follow through.
yeah. Having said that, I mean, when Batman does come in at the end and he's gone to this location, and I can't even remember what the location was, but when he finds everyone and the him and Alfred kind of team up, even though Alfred gets injured near the end, they kind of team up to help get Simon Stagg and Michael Holt out and rescue
Mhm.
them from Professor Pig and Mr. Toad. So overall, I mean, it's a decent story. I like the shadowy portrayal of Batman. I like how he kind of attacks from the dark, and he uses the smoke bombs and things like that. So Yeah, I mean, his gadgets were cool, and I liked the ending battle. But other than that, I mean, it was kind of just a blase first episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I think they're trying to set things up, but if you don't know where they're going, you don't know they're setting things up. Like Simon Stagg is here for a reason. They do a lot with him later on.
Yeah,
Ironically though, Michael Holt does not get used again, if I remember correctly. Um, which
interesting.
is a little disappointing. Would you say? I'm sorry.
I said that's interesting because it feels like from the first episode they would set him up for more in the future.
Yeah, I'm actually looking. Yeah, nothing.
Hmm.
He doesn't become anything. I mean, that might have been something that they were like maybe hoping for a season two. But I mean, Simon Stagg plays a big part because they do a lot with Metamorpho. I think he plays a part in that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is he I want to say it's like his son-in-law's Metamorpho. I mean, it's been a while since I watched this whole series.
Oh, they're doing a lot of
Um,
family stuff in this, then, aren't they?
it's been a while. But yeah, like everything is seed planting in these first few episodes, and yeah, I can't disagree with anything you're saying. And I had trouble getting into this show too. I just stuck with it, and by the time it got really good, I was okay with it.
Gotcha. And that the family aspect does bring me to another point because at the end, when we do find out, it's because Alfred's injured and he is technically Bruce's bodyguard, so he can't perform his duties. He brings in someone else to be his bodyguard, Bruce's bodyguard, and that's Katana.
Mhm.
And the weird part about that was, I mean, it's very strange for Katana to be Bruce Wayne's bodyguard in the first place, but they threw in this element that she is Alfred's goddaughter,
Mhm.
which I thought was a very strange approach. So what do you think of that decision?
Well, what I will say to that is we know more about Katana now, I think because of Suicide Squad and maybe diving more into her uh into the comics with her because of maybe the movie and even because of this. At the time I didn't really think anything of it. I'll completely admit, like, okay, I knew she wasn't Alfred's goddaughter in the comics,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't care. I knew what they were doing. They announced this early that Katana was going to be Bruce's sidekick. um could they have just gone the Batgirl route? Yeah, but I think it is representation. I think they wanted to do something different, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with it. I mean, we see Barbara, where they're clearly setting up Batgirl for the future. Again, not
Yeah.
something they paid off in season one, but I was okay with it. Like, again, they were pretty clear from the beginning of this show that this is doing its own thing, and yeah, it's definitely a choice. And
Yeah.
but I think the voice actress for Katana was really good, and I think she made me interested in the character.
Okay. Awesome. Um, I don't know that I was really interested. I mean, she started getting a little more interesting in episodes 2 and 3. Of course, we did just meet her at the end of episode 1. But yeah, she really didn't hook the goddaughter storyline didn't really hook me in the first episode, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I don't even remember where that goes. I just
Okay.
remember she does pretty much become like the sidekick, and that's where um obviously the season goes. And I remember being completely fine with it once I just accepted it.
So she does eventually become more comic booky Katana. Uh,
Her I don't remember her costume being anything to write home about.
okay.
But she gets a domino mask basically, and she fights with a sword, and she's just Batman's sidekick from what I remember. Again, I have not watched this show in probably maybe 8 years.
Okay.
Um so it's definitely been a while, but yeah, she is the Robin. Like, they were very upfront with that. Like, she's going to be his sidekick.
Okay. All right. Well, anything else on episode 1 before we move on, Joe?
Nope.
Okay.
That's
All right.
Nope,
Well,
that's good.
moving on to episode 2. This episode is titled Secrets, and it did premiere July 20th, 2013. So the synopsis here: Batman is hot on the heels of an extremely dangerous thief named Magpie, who not only sports razor sharp fingernails laced with poison, but is also invulnerable to pain. But Batman is not the only one after her. Introducing Lieutenant James Gordon is also hot on the trail of Magpie, and the two ultimately go head to head to catch the villain. Uh, so, Joe, this episode, honestly, out of the three, this is my favorite.
I'm glad you said that because it's mine too.
I
Um,
really like this
and it's weird
episode,
because
and
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
honestly, I wasn't expecting to like this one because when I saw Magpie was the villain, I was like, Magpie. But I'll say this. Have you ever actually seen a magpie?
I don't even know what the heck a magpie is.
Okay. So we have them in spades out here in Colorado. They are these vicious birds. They're kind of scavengers, and they're black and silver and blue. They've got some streaks in that. So they kind of the costume that Magpie had in this episode, I really like it because it does resemble a magpie. So magpies are like a very vicious pigeon, and
Oh,
we
they're
have them.
cool looking.
Yeah,
I
they are.
never. I didn't even know a magpie was a bird. Like
We have them everywhere out here, and they will attack other birds. So
they
they're
might they might be the coolest looking bird I've ever seen. Like they're really cool looking. The color scheme on them is awesome.
yeah, it's really cool. And I didn't know what they were before I moved here, so I never knew what the character Magpie was in reference to. But now I do, and now you do. Um, so, but I had never seen the character Magpie portrayed quite like she was here, and I don't know how comic accurate it was, but I like it. I actually really liked her as a villain in this episode.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you where like when I saw Magpie, I'm like, oh, I remember Magpie was on this show, and she was in a few episodes. I don't remember how many, but I remember being like, oh, like Magpie, like why Magpie? But she's entertaining, like, and the story's pretty compelling. Um, Again, at this point, you just think, okay, one-off episode with Magpie, and I think this episode does a really good job of incorporating Gordon's introduction with a compelling villain on top of it. Where the first episode, like you said, Professor Pig and Toad are not the most compelling villains in that episode. They're there to serve the purpose of getting Alfred kidnapped so you could see Alfred and Bruce work together. Where in this
Mhm.
one, I think it's done much more organically and fairly interesting. I mean, that's the bigger deal is it's much more compelling.
Yeah, and I thought she actually had some pretty good exchanges with Batman. I thought the fights between Batman and Magpie in this episode were really good. It
Yeah.
almost made me forget how much I didn't like this Batsuit. So,
Or the animation.
yeah. So, there's a thing though with the animation,
Well, I mean the style, I should say. The
the style.
style,
Yeah,
not the animation, like the fluidity of it, and it's good. Like I like the way they move, and I every time I see Wayne Manor, I think Wayne Manor is beautiful in this. Like I
it's
can't state
gorgeous.
that enough. Like I love the way that looks. But yeah, like honestly, the action scenes in this, it made me think like, how do they when they animate the action in this? Like, do they actually do motion capture to get like a style? Like, how do they do that for this? Because it looks very well choreographed.
Well, so I know I almost wonder if they did do some motion capture because I know they did like they built like a utility belt for the show and things like that because
Mhm.
they wanted to see how it moved on the body.
Okay.
And they incorporated that into the show. Um, so it makes me wonder if they did do some motion capture, but
Mhm.
I don't know for
Yeah.
a fact. Um, but another thing I really like about this episode is the introduction of James Gordon.
Mhm.
I like the way he was handled in the episode. I love that kind of beginning, Batman and Gordon kind of feeling each other out process where Gordon
Yep.
doesn't trust Batman and he's a vigilante at this point. Um, and they're kind of at odds, which is cool. But I think that my favorite part of the episode is not action related. It's and this show is full of deep pulls. We have Lunkhead in this episode. Um, I love the little conversation between Gordon and Lunkhead, where Gordon's trying to get information from Lunkhead,
Yep.
and of course, Lunkhead is having none of it, and he doesn't trust Gordon or anybody else apparently. But Gordon knows the secret to his heart because he keeps giving him chocolate bars, and the more chocolate that Gordon gives him, the more information that Lunkhead provides. So I really like that whole exchange because it shows you how savvy James Gordon is. And I really like that.
And I'm not familiar with Lunkhead at all. Like, I knew he had to have been a comic character, but I don't even know, like, where are you familiar with him from?
Like I said, it's a really deep pull. If my recollection serves me right, I think he was. Oh man, I want to say he was in
He's in
Nightfall.
Arkham
Like,
Asylum.
yeah, he's in Arkham Asylum, but I think he's in Nightfall or one of those books where all of the Arkham inmates have been released and Batman's got to go through them.
Okay.
That's my only recollection of Lunkhead, but again, it's a deep pull for the show.
His first appearance was Arkham Asylum Living Hell.
Mm, okay.
So that's not even the Arkham Asylum I'm thinking of.
Yeah. But you also, like you mentioned earlier, you do get the introduction of Barbara Gordon in this show as well, which is a kind of a different take on Barbara as well. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's still accurate. I think it's just, a younger version of her
Hmm.
than we're used to seeing when Batman starts out. Because I think most of the time when we see Barbara, she's introduced right before she's Batgirl because we're introduced to her because of Batgirl. So
Yeah,
I'm
she's very much
okay
more confrontational than I'm used to
with her
for
father, you
Barbara
mean?
Gordon. Yeah, I mean, with her father and just overall, like she seems like she's got a chip on her shoulder in this portrayal.
Yeah, to me, she just seems like a typical 13-year-old girl. Or, like.
Oh well, yeah. Now that you say that, it does kind of.
Yeah, come on now. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's just because we're not used to seeing young Barbara. We're used to seeing Batgirl Barbara, or right before she becomes Batgirl. So here
yeah.
we're seeing a typical high school girl just kind of getting into it with her father. Um, and I think they were playing the long game with that, and it's a shame whenever you get to any of these adaptations and you could tell they're playing the long game and we never get to see it pay off, which unfortunately is the case more times than it isn't with a lot of this stuff. But unfortunately, with comic books or comic book characters, you have to kind of do that. You have to pick a spot and you have to hope that you can play this long form game, but it doesn't always pan out.
Yeah, agreed. But yeah, the standout in this episode, as I've said, was Magpie for me. And I would be interested in seeing more episodes with her in it. So if anything, I may go back to this show just to see what else they do with her going
Yeah,
forward.
she's definitely in at least 2 or 3 more episodes. I was just looking over some of the episodes. She's in the finale, so she has to play a pretty big part if she's involved in the finale. And there was some really big Batman villains by the time we got to the finale. So
Yeah, and I feel
and
like that's kind of what this is setting up. You're setting up the villain, so in the end, like in the finale of the first season, and I don't know what that is, but it feels like we're going to come back to a lot of these things we're setting up early.
yeah, and the other thing is, I gotta say, like, even knowing the show, I thought the twist was really cool with Cassie. Like, I didn't see it coming. Even when she was revealed, I was like, wait, that's the secretary? Like, I didn't. I mean, maybe I just wasn't paying attention enough, but I thought it was a cool little twist. I liked the whole dual identity thing with her tying into
Yeah,
Lunkhead and the experiments. I thought was really cool.
yeah. When they said her name, because I think they just called her Cassandra.
Mhm.
But when they said Cassandra, I was like, oh, okay. So yes, I do like the little nods that they did, and I do think there was a lot of world building, and I think the creators really cared about the world of Batman. And it is unfortunate that it just didn't go any farther than it did. But I did
Yeah.
like that setup. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Um, okay, but anything else big on episode 2?
Nope. I'm ready to talk about episode 3 because I'm curious what you think of Anarchy.
Okay, well let's get into that. So episode 3 was actually exact when this episode is kind of releasing. So we're recording on the 26th. It may come out. It's going to come out later than this. But this episode, number 3, Tests, came out July 27th, 2013. So almost 10 years to the day here when we're recording, Joe. Um, but a new villain has arrived in Gotham to challenge Batman. Anarchy. Resembling a ghost image of Batman, Anarchy prides himself on his brilliance and intends to prove it to Batman by manipulating a pair of street thugs, Junkyard Dog and Daedalus, who is Doodlebug in the comics, which I have no recollection of.
Yeah, I don't
But
know.
they are roped in to do Anarchy's bidding. But Anarchy's real plan is far more devastating, seeking to create a disaster seen by all of Gotham and proving once and for all that even the great Batman is powerless to protect his fair city from the clutches of anarchy. So, Joe, this is the one you're kind of excited about. So tell me your thoughts on episode 3.
Well, honestly, I don't remember if I knew going in or I just remember, but Anarchy is pretty much the big bad of at least the first part of season 1. And I remember thinking, why Anarchy?
Mm.
Um, I don't even remember if I ended up enjoying it in the long run because I think I was ready to get to, the more, you know, common Batman villains because I think I was sick of Anarchy in this show. I like his costume. I like what they were going for, but that's not what he does in the comics. I know Anarchy more from Tim Drake Robbins. He's Tim Drake Robbins' like biggest villain in the comics. He's like
Hmm.
he's a young kid if I remember right, or like a teenager, or maybe like low 20s. Um,
Well, he's been portrayed a couple of different ways. Again, my most knowledge from Anarchy comes from the video games, from the
mhm.
Arkham games,
Well,
because
okay, so
he's
think about the time frame. That was right
yeah,
around the time this came out. So they were definitely piggybacking off of this version.
yeah, and it is kind of similar to the more original version of Anarchy as well.
And he was
Um,
also, I want to say he was on Arrow.
I think so.
Anarchy,
Yeah.
Anarchy had like a resurgence at this time. But like it was never like a big resurgence. It's just like he was showing up in all these things and he wasn't really hitting big like maybe they wanted to.
Hmm. Yeah, because I mean, he's very much in the games. He's very much a side story, kind of like Professor Pig. But it
Hmm.
was always one of those situations where when I came across a Professor Pig part of the game, I was like, "Oh, this is cool. I like it."
Yes.
When I came across Anarchy, it was kind of, "Oh God, this guy again."
Yeah, and
So,
I don't remember the whole outsmarting thing in the comics. I don't think that was ever Anarchy's thing, and I could be wrong because I mean I haven't read the Tim Drake Robin in a while, but I don't like he almost comes off almost like a Riddler in this, where he's trying to outsmart Batman, and I don't remember that side of him as a character.
the most knowledge I have of Anarchy is he's just trying to cause as much chaos as possible.
Exactly. That's
So
what I remember too.
you can kind of see a little bit of that in this portrayal, but it's
Hmm.
also like you said, it's kind of more Riddler.
Yeah.
So yeah, and maybe they just didn't want to use Riddler or get into the bigger villains in the first season
Hmm.
as much. But yeah, that's where it came across for me as well. But I mean, so far as a story and a plot device, I mean, I do like this challenge for Batman,
Hmm.
and I like that. I do like kind of the ending of the episode where it's kind of like, what is Batman going to do? Because it sort of kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger. Like, what's Batman going to do against this anarchy?
You mean in
Um,
general, like in the grand
in
scheme of
general,
things?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, not like an exact cliffhanger to end the episode, but kind
Hmm.
of just of how is Batman going to combat this guy going forward.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, and so far as the junkyard dog and Daedalus or however you say his name, I don't know anything about those guys, so that one's a little interesting to me. Again, they're doing deep pulls, but it's deep pulls that even Batman fans are like, wait, who? So,
Yeah. I don't know.
but so the character design, I like almost everything about Anarchy's appearance. There was something about the face though that was just a little goofy to me. Like the eyes.
Well, it's kind of like, okay, what's going on? Is it a mask? Is it not a mask? What, like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's like the animation liberty where you can get away with that because it's like that. Don't ask questions. This is just what it looks like. But and
yeah.
they went for that, like the bright white costume, which again, not what Anarchy looks like in the comics, but they're going that, like you said, the duality route of Batman. Almost like, is it Wraith or Wrath in the comics, which is like the anti-Batman. He doesn't look like this. He's not like all white, but Anarchy here is more going for like anti-Batman.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's one of the things that's off-putting is because usually Anarchy's all in red, and they did
With
go
that
for
gold
white
mask,
here.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and even I think so. He was Arkham Origins was one of the big games he was featured in.
Okay.
So in Arkham Origins, he's kind of more of he's got a leather jacket, but it's all red and that kind of thing. So and he pulls up a red hood.
Mm-hmm.
So but yeah, I mean, not a bad episode, but again, I still think out of the three, I think two was the strongest out of these three.
I will say I think the finale for this one might be the strongest. I
The
like the
finale
whole
of episode three.
yes, I like the whole trolley car thing and Batman trying to outsmart him so he could save both trolleys. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a good kind of it's a trope almost
Mm-hmm.
with
Oh, absolutely.
superheroes.
Yeah.
You can't
You can only
can
save
you
one.
save both? Yeah.
Yeah, you can't. There's no way for you to save both, and then the superhero finds a way to save both. Obviously,
There's a reason
especially
it's a
on a kid
trope though,
show.
because it works.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean it always makes me think, and I know this is a silly place to go back to, but it almost always makes me go back to Batman Forever
Oh,
with
geez, yeah,
Riddler dropping the tubes.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but I always come back to that, and then of course, you know, they did it in Spider-Man with Green Goblin, so it's just a trope that always seems to happen in these superhero projects, but it always works. So yeah, but there we go, Joe. So we have talked about the first three episodes of Beware the Batman. Interesting here. We were talking about the ratings earlier, and I was telling you about apparently these were not great ratings at the time. They were pretty disappointed in it, which led to its cancellation. But if you look at the numbers, the premiere had a 1.34, episode 2 had a 1.12, and episode 3 had a 1.2. Do you know how many shows would kill to have those ratings today?
Well, this and so, and I don't remember when like the streaming age started, but like
Mm.
this was right before that. So was it to the point where people were already checking out, kind of the whole appointment viewing type of stuff? I mean, honestly, there was no appointment viewing with this. Like it was. That's what I think frustrates me the most about this show is how can you say the ratings were bad when people couldn't watch it? Like, what did you expect the ratings to be?
Yeah, well, and the crazy thing is, let me put this in perspective for you. So the 1.2 on the final episode we talked about here,
Mm-hmm.
Superman and Lois's finale this year had a 0.73 rating,
Yeah.
and it's the biggest show on the CW.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Times
goes
have
to show you
changed.
how different the times are.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, every show on TV, with the major exceptions, I mean, on network TV, almost every show on network TV would kill to have the ratings that Beware the Batman had in 2013.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting how much times change. And one thing I kept thinking about when I was watching this show is I wonder if this show were to be released today for the first time. Say it was the show that was going to be released on Amazon or if it was coming out on Max or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
how different it would be in this day and time.
Yeah, I don't know because I mean at some sometimes people are more willing to go with different interpretations, but sometimes people just burn anything with fire that's a little different. You never know where people are going to go nowadays. I think this animation style, people would still be put off by that today. I think people want, I mean, the CGI craze of that era, like between Green Lantern and then this, like that was a thing back then where everyone was trying this with all these weird shapes and stuff. Where nowadays they don't really do that as much anymore. But nowadays, it would be more like Rise of the Ninja Turtles, like that kind of animation is like the
Well,
one that turns people off, but they keep using.
I think it can work because you have shows like Camp Cretaceous that are the CGI style.
Yes, but it's a more of a traditional looking
It
CGI where
is,
they're
yeah.
not going that big blocky. Like I don't know how to explain it, but like this is the exact same animation as Green Lantern. Like
It is.
even the crazy weird looking, for some reason the costumes in Green Lantern I guess are less crazy looking, where it works better for that than like Batman look. I think Batman's the worst one in this, to be honest with you. I think everyone else kind of looks fine.
And therein lies the major problem. Because with Green Lantern, yes, it's the same animation style, but Green Lantern looks like traditional Green Lantern.
Yes.
I think this show is beautiful. There's a lot of really good looking stuff in this show. The problem is the main character, the one we love to see, Batman, he's the worst looking character in the show.
And like I'm looking at Bruce Wayne right now and he looks fine.
Yeah.
It's the design of Batman that is,
Hmm.
because like not all of the characters look oddly shaped. Why does he look so odd as Batman?
Yeah, and I think had they retooled this suit a little bit, had they made it look a little more traditional,
Mhm.
had they gone the Green Lantern route and just made him a recognizable Batman, I do think that would have went a long way for this show because I think there's a lot of things that are set up here well. Um, but at the end of the day, if I don't like looking at Batman, then it kind of defeats the point.
Yeah, I agree.
So, um, but yeah, and this show, I don't really think it's even caught the cult classic craze or anything like that. Like it's just a show that seems like it's forgotten. And that's kind of unfortunate because even shows like The Batman, they had a pretty good audience at the time, but I think it's that
Yes.
show has a bigger audience now than it ever did before. You know, there's people that watch the Halloween episode every year. There's people that watch the
Yeah.
animated movie Batman
Wait,
Dracula.
even as a cult classic, the Batman ran for what, 5 seasons?
Five seasons, yeah.
Yeah,
So
where
technically, I
this,
mean, it ran longer than Batman the Animated Series.
which is crazy. But yeah, with
Yeah.
this, like even as someone who, well, I mean, I won't even necessarily defend the show, but I think most people that did watch the show will say, "Hey, check it out." Like it might not be for you, but give it a shot because it's not. I mean, it's even weird saying it's not as bad as its reputation because its reputation is it's forgotten. Like there's not really a reputation behind it. Nobody says it's bad. Like I've never heard anyone say, "Oh, that show's terrible." It's more like I never checked it out. So it's hard. You're right. It's definitely not a cult classic, but I think the people that have watched it will say, "Oh, I stuck it out, and it ended up being a really good show." But we everyone pretty much understands why nobody watched it because it was pretty hard to find if you wanted to watch it. Like most the people that even did watch it when it aired, they're like missed episodes because we couldn't find it. Like it shouldn't be
Mhm.
that hard to find a show you're trying to watch. So
Exactly.
yeah, and
But
I
you
will
know that
say, like, I don't think we're gonna cover any more episodes on this show unless maybe something is relevant to what's going on. But I mean, and it's a long shot. But I will say it's a pretty harmless show to just put on every once in a while. Put on a 20-minute episode and just check it out. Give it a shot because I do think you can get stuff out of it. It's new, different Batman content. Like it's not hurting anything. It's pretty innocent.
yeah, I agree. I mean, if you're hungry for some Batman content, it's something that's available. It's there. As of right now, it's still on Max. So, and Lord knows how long that'll be there. But so it is available. And the interesting thing about that, Joe, is a show today that fails like this one did. You're not getting a Blu-ray release out of it. So it's neat that you actually do have that availability where if you wanted to, I don't know how hard it is to find now, but you could buy a Blu-ray
Yeah,
of
that's a
this.
good question. And I think you could buy it digitally, obviously, and it is on
Mhm.
Max. Because I think I have it digitally too. I don't know why. It must have been on sale and I bought it digitally years ago. Um, but yeah, this was honestly, I do specifically remember buying the first set, and I watched the second half of this show on Blu-ray because I had no idea when the second half was airing, and I was just like, screw it, I'm just gonna buy the Blu-ray and watch it on there because it was probably pretty cheap when it came out, and that was the easiest way for me to watch it because it was, again, it was prior to the digital days. I'm thinking, why didn't I just like buy it digitally? Because you couldn't probably in 2013. So I literally
Right.
just was
Yeah.
like, it's easier for me to buy the Blu-ray and watch all episodes on 2 discs.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a few other little interesting tidbits here. They really tried to push this show. But where the Batman got a limited series comic book. I don't know if you knew that, Joe. There's
Yes.
6 issues, and it got a collected edition. And there was even an online game titled Gotham Streets that was on the Cartoon Network website.
That I
So
don't remember.
I have no idea what that would have looked like. I'm sure it's one of those HTML games, but at the time, and it was posted in 2014. So that is so hilarious to me that the game was on Cartoon Network's website when the show was not on Cartoon Network.
They must have developed that prior to everything getting canceled.
Yeah, so if that's something you're interested in, not the game because I'm sure you can't find that anymore. But Beware the Batman, the comic series, is on DC Universe Infinite, so you can go back and read that if you want to. That'll give you a little bit of the flavor of the show, and then yeah, so the episodes are readily available. So if you're hungry for Batman content, like I said, check it out. It may be, you may be like me where there's a outside shot that you may continue watching it, or you may be like Joe, it may really strike you and you may find some new Batman content that you really enjoy. But Joe, do you have any final thoughts as we wrap it up here on Beware the Batman?
No, I mean, there's really not much more to say that we haven't already, covered. I think just, give it a shot. If you don't like it, I completely understand. This was really just something that I felt would be fun to cover. One, I mean, it's always nice to cover this stuff on an anniversary, but just because this show doesn't get a lot of coverage, I think it was just, I wanted to get you to watch it. In all honesty, that was one of my big things, was trying to get you to at least cover it and then check it out. But yeah, I mean, it's 26 episodes. It's a Batman show that you could pretty much go through really quickly. And I will say, even if you kind of like the first few episodes, maybe even skip to the second half and go to an episode with Lady Shiva or something like that, and check that out, because they do get into some cool villains by the end. And that's when the show really did hit its stride, unfortunately. So give it a shot. Let us know what you think if you do check it out, or tell me I'm crazy and it's not worth checking out. I get it. But yeah, I mean, I just, any type of Batman content that kind of becomes a forgotten maybe gem, I think is cool, because it's not one, like you said, this isn't even a cult classic. This is one that has been pretty much forgotten, but there are still a few of us out there that remember the hassle of trying to find this to watch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the saddest part about this is that after the failure of this show, we have not gotten. I mean, it's been 10 years, and we still haven't had a Batman animated series yet
Yeah, and
since
I would
this
hope
one.
it's not because of this failure, because I still don't think this show failed because, I mean, I get, maybe it's revisionist history, but I don't think this show ever had a chance to succeed. Like, they did not give this show a chance when it was airing. Excuse me.
No, no, I
Um,
agree with that.
but
Well, I mean, and this is the last little tidbit I'll throw in here, just because I'm still looking at the research here. Uh, this show was nominated for 4 Daytime Emmy Awards in 2014.
what?
It was nominated for Outstanding Children's Animated Program. Andrea Romano got nominated for Outstanding Casting. It got Outstanding Directing nomination and Outstanding Main Title and Graphic Design, which I don't know what else came out that year, but I can't believe it didn't win that, because that's probably the best part of the show.
What's that? The design, the
The,
animation design.
the graphic design and the main title.
Yeah. Well,
So
and I mean, shame on us. We didn't even say like who the actors are. So it's Anthony. You didn't say it in the beginning, right? Anthony
I
Rivavar.
didn't.
Anthony Ruvavar, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, is Batman. Somali Montano is Tatsu Yamashiro, who's Katana, and JB Blanc is Alfred. That's the three main cast. I mean, Tara Strong plays Barbara Gordon in this.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm not going to list off the whole cast, but I mean, those are names that do not get mentioned in the grand scheme of Batman voice actors. Which, let's be honest, that we've been spoiled with some voice actors, and someone's going to get forgotten down the line. But yeah, I think, I mean, for a show that got no recognition whatsoever from the public, it's pretty cool that it did get some Emmy nominations.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think that's a good place to kind of put a pin in it and wrap it up for Beware the Batman. Definitely, guys, give this show a chance. Lee Akrit, I can't wait for your response to this episode. I'm very curious what what your thoughts are. But yeah, so 10 years of Beware the Batman, a forgotten Batman show, unfortunately. But moving forward, I did want to let you guys know that I plan on, and Joe's learning this for the first time, I plan on covering Justice League War World very soon, since that movie just came out. And kind of as a, unfortunately, forgetful part on me, we never covered Legion of Superheroes. So that is something we absolutely have to catch up on. But we probably will cover those very soon. So that's something for you guys to look forward to. So if you haven't seen those movies yet, and Joe, you haven't even watched War World yet, have you?
No, I haven't. I have not caught War World yet. And we're coming up on. Man, we have a new DC movie. In what 3-4 weeks with Blue Beetle. So
We do. We have Blue Beetle coming up. So we do have several things that we're going to be talking about soon in the DC world. So keep your eyes peeled on the social media accounts and keep up with us there. But Joe, thank you so much again for joining me and making me watch this show. And why don't you tell everybody where they can find you out there on social media?
you guys can find me on, and I'm saying Twitter. Mine is still Twitter. I am not X yet. I don't know. My phone is not updated or what, but it still says Twitter. Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as J411, and what's that? Facebook as Joe Fornarato, FORNAROTTO. And yeah, thank you for covering this. I know it was. I didn't bug you too much on this. This was kind of like a, what do we need to cover this week? And it just so happened that it was the anniversary in July, which fit up, fit pretty well. So thank you, though.
That's the convenient story. What Joe's not telling you is he basically threatened to quit the show if I didn't cover Where the Batman's. No, but thanks, Joe. For myself, you can find my social media accounts on Instagram, Twitter, or X, Letterboxd, and Threads at mecarter89. That's mecarter89. The show can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at tfrbatpod. Once again, if you have thoughts or opinions or suggestions or hate mail about Beware the Batman, you can send us an email at tfrbatpod@gmail.com. If you're looking for a way to support the show, the best and easiest way to do that is to leave us a rating and review on whatever platform you listen to us on. If you do leave us a written review on Apple Podcasts, we will read those on the show. If you're looking for another way to support us, and we don't ask that you spend a dime, but if you'd like to, we certainly appreciate it. You can go to you can go to redbubble.com and search Shop TFR, all one word, and you can find all of our logos created by Justin Kowalski there on some very cool merch. Our theme song was composed by the very talented Gaurav Venkateswar, and his music can be found on gbtunes.com. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Fire Rises. Thank you so much, guys, for checking us out. For Joe, I'm Eric, and until next time, make sure you keep that bat signal lit and pointed skyward. Batman was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane and is the sole property of Warner Bros. Discovery. The Fire Rises, a Batman podcast, is in no way associated with Warner Bros. Discovery, DC Comics, or DC Studios. The thoughts and opinions of the participants of this show are their own and do not represent the companies that they work for. Thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
Lunkhead don't like you!
Lunkhead, you're not in trouble. I just want to talk about Batman.
Batman not hurt Lunkhead again!
Barbara, sweetheart, now is not good. Lunkhead, I'm sorry. I know it was Batman who put you away before, that he put you in a coma for 2 months.
Lunkhead not go back to prison! Lunkhead been good!
I know. I just have a few questions and I'll go away. I brought candy. I have a file with me from the time that you spent at Blackgate. It says you were involved in an experiment, something about mind control.
Uh-huh. Wanted to fix Lunkhead brain. Didn't work. More candy now.
Why would Batman care about this experiment?
Don't know.
One more question. Was there anyone else in the experiment with you?
The lady, nice to Lunkhead, in other cage, took her away.